Okay, greetings everyone. It's really great to have your company here tonight. I'd like to welcome everybody to this really important discussion on Back from the Brink. Our conversation today is coming during COVID lockdown. Restrictions with speakers mean that we've got people coming from Sydney, thanks Nerida, Brisbane, Sunshine Coast, Beaudesert, and I'm on Tamborine Mountain. So it's great to be having this conversation with you in all these different ways. I'd like to acknowledge and pay respects to the elders past, present, and all the young ones that are coming on who are taking up the mantle of looking after country and community. It's so important. And we acknowledge and honour the traditional owners of all the lands that we are broadcasting to and from today. So thank you so much. And with that, I'd like to welcome Auntie Janice Page to give us some words of wisdom.
Okay, Bugul Yung Jungri Wally to not just the Mananjali country, Mananjali jargon, but Gubba Gubba, Kumbaberi, Wongaberi, Gungajin, and all our neighbouring borders, our shared borders. We welcomed you to country, like this year specifically, NAIDOC of healing country. And in our culture, you heal country and look after country. Then it overflows into healing and looking after your people, your mob, you know. And so it's always a great honour to take the time out to respect our caretakers and custodians that have gone before us, because they teach us so well about being caretakers and being caretakers of the burns and the bullens, the mountains and the waterways and the jargon, the land and everything that is on it, and the spiritual connection that they have with that, and the custodians of the stories that connect us to that. And, you know, of the language that told the stories, and about coming together. And as we're meeting here, like if we were meeting on country, we'd be creating a Bora ring, you know, because that's where they gathered around and shared those stories. They shared their knowledge, they shared their resources with their neighbours, with the neighbouring clans, and the kinship lines and the song lines. And so I thank them for that, and I honour them for that, for passing that on. And for the elders present all over this country, in every part of this country, there are amazing elders that are still, you know, continuing those stories. Like our creative arts and our stories, it's a wonderful experience that is happening, that is opening up and becoming a global attraction. And so there's a spiritual connection that you can't take away. So that's still alive and it's still well. And I also want to pay respect to our emerging elders. As Bronwyn said, we have amazing young people coming through who, you know, we're talking about, you know, beautiful kids, and they're the future generation, and they're going to take this culture to be shared amongst all. It's for all people, because the land is for everyone, and we live on it, and it's a beautiful land. So I want to thank you for inviting me to be a part of this amazing collection of people here, and I feel really very privileged. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Auntie Janice. It's really wonderful to be welcomed on Mananjali country, and for you to extend that welcome to everybody who's listening today. Today I'm speaking to three fabulous guests who have had first-hand experience in different ways of what it means to be standing on the brink and to be able to come back. Jandamara Cad is a Yorta Yorta and Jaja Warung descendant. He has been a finalist in every major Australian portrait prize, including the Archibald Prize, where he had painted portraits of Archie Roach, Jack Charles and Nova Peris, who is looking over his shoulder right now. His work has been exhibited in galleries across Australia. Jan Damara wasn't always the confident artist we know today, though. He had a troubled childhood, and in the words of the Sunshine Coast Daily, Jan Damara Cad had reached one of the lowest points in his life. But then he was handed a weapon, a paintbrush. So welcome, Jan Damara. Look forward to hearing more about that. We also have the fabulous, really honoured to have Sisters Inside founder Debbie Kilroy, OAM. Debbie's passion for justice is the result of her personal experience of the criminal or injustice or justice system, and an unwavering belief that prison represents a failure of justice. Established in 1992, Sisters Inside is an independent community organisation based in Queensland, which advocates for the collective human rights of women and girls in prison and their families, and provides services to address their individual needs. Welcome and thank you for joining us. And finally, to discuss coming back from the brink, is Nerida Woods, the CEO and General Manager of a very unique organisation called Heaps Decent. Nerida has a background in arts management, working as a tour manager, event coordinator, consultant, and general manager for a youth theatre company. Welcome, Nerida.
Thank you.
So I've got a question that I'm going to ask for everybody. And we might start off with Jan Damara, but the question is, do you think it is possible to change your life, to come back from the brink, and can that change be permanent? What do you reckon, Jan Damara?
Absolutely. I do believe it is possible. And, at the root cause of it, I do feel that it's coming back to listen to our own spirit again and not be distracted by the mental stuff that goes on within us, and part of that is coming back to our connection to country, our connection to community, a connection to our families, and all of those beautiful ceremonies, rites of passage and those things that support that.
Yeah. Okay. What about you, Debbie? Do you think it's possible to come back from the brink and change your future?
Well, I suppose it depends what you think the brink is. And I think before I continue to talk, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners. I reside on Nhulunbuy land, stolen, unceded land, here in Meanjin, and I'd like to acknowledge elders past and present. I think that for First Nations peoples in this country have been on the brink and still are every day because of the invasion of this country. And for me to think about, as a white woman, being on the brink, it means nothing compared to having your land, your country stolen, your culture, your language, and everything else, and still happening, 230 plus years later without any recognition or acknowledgement of the truth of the history of this country. For me as an individual, I think that all of us can be on the brink at any time, anywhere as individuals, but I think that I look at it more so as a society, as a community. And I think for all of us to be able to move from the brink, from the edge, if you like, because that's really what the brink means, you're on the edge, how we can join together and move from the edge to move forward as a full community, where there has been reparation and land given back to First Nations people in this country. So, I think I'm looking at it in a different context. I think I want to bring it in a different context because since invasion and racial capitalism and the world that we live in continues to give us the same old. And when, we start talking about the prison industrial complex and the damage that does, then we're really talking about the brink and how, people, and predominantly Aboriginal people, Torres Strait people, are caged in this country.
I think this is going to be a really interesting discussion. Thanks for that, Deb. Really appreciate that perspective because I think I'd have to agree with you. Nerida, what do you think? Is it possible? Do you think it is possible to come back from? You've worked a lot with juvenile in juvenile detention centres. and with young people in all sorts of ways. Do you think it's possible for them to come back from really hard situations and to develop resilience?
Firstly, thank you for the welcome and the opportunity to join the discussion. And I'd also like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation from where I join you this evening, and say thank you and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. We have the incredible opportunity in my organisation to work with young people in several youth justice centres. And I very much second what's been said. In my experience, I think it's possible for young people to develop resilience and come through incredible hardship and adversity, but there has to be substantial intervention and the right environment and circumstances and support to be made available for that change to happen.
Yeah, well, I think that's very true, and I look forward to unpacking that a little bit more. We've got some music that some of your that's come out of your project. I think we'll see if we can go to that. We had a few technical problems before. Norm?
The first page of my story was bright, but then the evil came and turned out the light. I was always up, staying out all night. Growing up was never easy, though I tried. No one was ever really there when I was down, putting on a brave face all around. I can't go on, I can't even find hope. No one to turn to, feeling so remote. From the highest heights to the lowest lows, I'll keep on going, that's all I know. From the highest heights to the lowest lows, I'll keep on going, that's all I know.
Yeah, well, that's a good segue to having a bit of a discussion with Jandamara. Jandamara, as I said before, you had a troubled childhood and ended up in trouble with the law. Can you describe what that was like and how you ended up in juvenile detention?
Yeah, it was a frustrating time growing up trying to navigate in a Western format, which is a very, as I said before, and part of, I feel that we can come back from the brink, and it was a very intellectual realm which was disconnected from that intuitive guidance and feeling within. We have this term Didiri, and in that it's a deep listening with the spirit. It is something we are systematically indoctrinated to give away our sovereignty over our own connections with our environment, with our community, with our family. And for me, I ran away from home at the age of 13 until I was about 17. And, well, actually, I never really ever went back home, but I was locked in juvenile institutions for stealing for food, stealing cars. And, I met up with a lot of other homeless First Nation, Aboriginal children on the streets, and we became a family. But most of us were laying out in fields, laying out in the open. And though we were feeling like we were repressed and suppressed in our emotional expression, because anger was the only way that we knew how to at that time express our deep sadness and frustrations. We were open in other ways. We would lay out in those fields and we'd feel so connected. And then at times the police would come down and give us a beating and bring us back to the reality of we are the stain on this society, which I had to not define myself as. Being locked up in some of those juvenile institutions over that 4-year period, in there was some that are in there for murder, and, some that are in there for rape, deprivation of liberty. You know what? Each and every one of them, you could see that pain was just, and that expression that they had was a part of themselves that was so repressed in the schooling system, in a system that doesn't see the value of culture, doesn't see the value of expression that doesn't come from turning the cogs of economy. So for me, myself and 4 other Aboriginal inmates had enough. This was at 16 years old, enough of the degradation, enough of the beatings, enough of the abuse, and we decided to get out of there. And we broke out and escaped and took off for 3 days recaptured and put in what was known as the pound. And, you know, being locked in there, 4 brick walls, no toilet, no bed, you know, just left with a bucket to defecate and urinate. And, you know, I was sharing before off camera, which I'll share on here. I feel it's about not letting those moments define who I was, and not letting the moments that we go through define who we are. As hard as they are and as full on as they are, I'm not saying that they don't have a validity in the way that they traumatize us. But, you know, I remember laying there on the floor there in my own feces and vomit and urine and even blood, after smashing my head against the wall, trying to just get somebody to hear me, to be heard, to be listened. And I don't even think it was in those cell walls. I think it was in life. If I had have had a rope, I would have taken my life without a doubt. But what it was I started to come to a recognition that it's myself that needs to, the world is possibly never going to change, and I need to face these things or whatever it is. When I got out of that cell, I stopped talking, I stopped communicating. I was really quite in a traumatized state. And a beautiful lady came in as a counselor and introduced me to a paintbrush. That became my weapon, that became my voice, it became a tool. But I believe it also aligned with that moment that life had knocked me to the ground. And yes, I could have got out, and I could have had choices before me. I could go back to the life I was, which was whiffing petrol, drinking myself into oblivion, taking substances of any kind, you know, sleeping with all sorts of women, and just wanting to burn the entire world down. But I started to realize through using that paintbrush, I started to understand in my own healing that life necessarily doesn't happen to us, but for us. And in that circumstance of being locked in that room, as much as I'd never wish it for anyone else or go through it again, it was a gift. It was a silver lining gift that opened things up inside me. And it made me realize my true strength is in my connection to country, my connection to community, my connection to my family. But not only on those surface levels, on a deeper level that radiates to the spiritual wealth of understanding that we belong, walking tall with everything around us, no longer feeling like an insignificant, separate little fragment in amongst 6 billion people, but understanding as part of that oneness that I know as my ancestors, our ancestors lived here, and that oneness of everything, that LORE, where you understand that, you know, it's reverence and respect, not a law, LAW, of fear and intimidation and, you know, a punitive punishment measures that are, you know, there to beat you down if you don't get with the program, which, you know, as I saw a lot of my fellow friends and what I saw as my family at those times, same thing, you know, beaten down by the system, the educational system, the system that is all about trying to get you to be a cog on a wheel, which, you know, doesn't work for myself and a lot of other, you know, so that for me, that connection was a way that I was able to see that I am not defined by that circumstance. And, you know, the resilience and beauty of my family before me, my mother, my aunties, my uncles, my cousins, that make those steps forward and heal and take that responsibility on. So it was an absolute journey, and the paintbrush was a big part of that for me.
So tell me a little bit more about that, because obviously, you know, you don't normally come across a paintbrush in a cell, do you? So how did that happen?
So once I was released from the isolation, they called it the pound. Once I was released from there, I just stopped talking. And I believed the authorities, the staff there, which there was some good ones, but there was some real, you know, obviously ones that had their power trips and their things. You know, when I got out and I stopped talking, I believed they didn't want embarrassment. They didn't want the media finding out that these kids were so traumatized by an experience. This place was closed down 4 years after running for 100 years and rampant sexual, physical, emotional, and, you know, mental abuse. So anyway, a beautiful counsellor came in and introduced me to that paintbrush, and, you know, wasn't one to there, you know, as part of that whole course of telling me or dictating to me what to do and how to do it. I mean, my number was 53 in there, and you were known as CAD, CAD 53, come forward, go to the toilet, you know, go to sleep, eat when we tell you. So, you know, that softness and that gentleness of that beautiful woman that handed me that paintbrush was holding that space for me to continue that healing or open up that healing aspect to myself, which I see for me is really just connecting with my deeper spirit, which a lot of it had just been repressed and suppressed and, you know, came out in violent tendencies, fighting police, smashing windows, getting into fights pretty much every day. And I didn't know that it was masking that deep inner sadness of yearning to come back to my spirit, come back. And those paintings started out with some traditional stories from my country. So it was a powerful...
So you found that kind of that medium and the stories, that's what opened like a doorway for you.
Yes, absolutely. And it was just an invitation. It was an invitation to greater things. I mean, a lot of my nan had to hold that stuff in all of her life. You know, she would have been beaten or she would have been, you know, possibly even killed, you know, if she, you know, did her ceremonies or sang her songs or spoke her language, you know, growing up on Cumragunja Mission, you know, and all of that. So, you know, all of that and severed those snip, cutting ties to family, displacement off land and cutting ties to community, connection to country, connection to ceremony. All of that, you know, was embedded in me in this intergenerational trauma and obviously embedded in our whole family line and a lot of other mob, you know, and that in itself, the repression of that and finding a voice, even back in the 80s and the 70s for me, you know, even having that voice was a battle, you know, it is changing and it is coming about a lot more, which my grandmother, if she was alive, she would be so proud at the voice that many of us and the younger ones, the Jar Jums, have today.
So interesting, because I think a lot of the conversation today is going to be about that, the capacity to be able to have a voice. And this very conversation is about giving a voice. So now, of course, you're known as an inspirational speaker and have spoken out over recent atrocities in the youth justice system. What would you say to those young people that are in the same space as you found yourself so long ago? What would you say to them now?
I say don't let yourself be defined by this situation. That means, you know, you might be behind those bars, but or you know, you might be in experiences of such as this, but you know that your spirit is greater than that. Know that you belong to a beautiful race of people who had no tooth decay, no sickness, no known, you know, crime rate, no known suicide. This was a reflection of a beautiful way that our mob had lived in harmony for thousands of generations. You are walking in those footprints. And though you are living in this Western format, and it may seem frustrating at times to even navigate or move through, know that you are not defined by that. Know that you transcend that. Know that you are powerful beyond belief. And if you could see those elders walking beside you, holding you in those moments when you're feeling like you're all alone, know that you never are, and your spirit, always stay close to your spirit and know that it's speaking to you and it will guide you and support you. As with all of the mob and community around you, that, you know, there's many that will walk beside you.
Fantastic. We might hear another little snippet of some of that music that we were hearing before. If we can go to that, Norm.
Old soldiers never die, they just fade away. I was a convict of the system, but I found them gates. Follow my dreams and try to keep my faith. Red, black and yellow, there's no time to discriminate. We started at the west side, where we show pride. 265, that's where we all ride. One false move, but we'll leave you terrified. We waiting on the new generation to arrive, so I could teach them to never apologise. Cause then they will see the weakness in your eyes. It doesn't matter if you didn't do the crime, just take the blame and go do your time.
Yeah, Go Do Your Time. It's a great song, and thank you, narrator. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but these are questions for Deb. Thank you again, Deb, for joining us. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the work of Sisters Inside?
Sure. So Sisters Inside is very much a grassroots organisation. We started when we were in prison, myself and other women back in the 90s, early 90s. So what had happened was, and this is when we were in Bogga Road. Bogga Road's now closed. And at that time, my close friend was murdered sitting beside me in prison, and I was stabbed a couple of times trying to stop her being murdered. And so, of course, that was, probably the most violent act that could happen inside a prison, but it was facilitated by the prison. Prison officers knew that the women had barbecue forks. They knew that they were sharpening. They knew that they were going to attack Debbie, my friend, her name was Debbie as well, and did nothing. So they facilitated that murder. And so after that murder, what had happened there's a spotlight on the women's prison down the back of Bogga Road. No one actually knew that there were women in Bogga Road down the back of the men's section. And really women were unheard of. And but because of this horrific murder, the spotlight came on the prison and the media. And so management at the time got moved out, got sacked, and new management came into the system. And at that time, there was what they would call a commissioner now, but the Director General had this idea to set up committees and wanted to trial it on us women, because at that stage there was about 100 women in the prison system in this state. So that, compared to what it is now, there's like nearly 1,000 on any one day. But and those committees, were around different things. It could have been around visits, it could have been around health, education, and the women inside, those of us prisoners, were driving the agenda. But when it was time, when I was being released on parole, I told the women that I would come back. And I did come back, and that's, we kept the meetings going, and, we then gave ourselves a name, which was Sisters Inside. And Sisters Inside had to be about all women. It couldn't be all women except Storm, who murdered my friend. So which actually meant that I needed to actually resolve the issues I had with Storm and the other women who actually murdered her. And so we did that ourselves in our committee meetings that we used to have every month in the chapel at Bogga Road. Not with the prison authorities. They had nothing to do with this. Today they would call this transformative justice. But we knew it. We've been doing this and practicing this for so long about how to survive in the prison system, and two, how to, resolve conflict. And it's really interesting that prisons being so violent that we're never asked about the strategies that we use and we know actually work to survive in that violent institution called the prison. But Storm and I ended up over a series of months resolve the issues to the point where I advocated for her to get parole, and she's been part of Sisters Inside ever since. I suppose the way that probably the quickest way to explain Sisters Inside now is that because we've become quite a big organisation, but we're very much relationship based. So and we have clearly articulated values that were written by us women in prison, and they're still alive today, that we operate within. The language of them, they're on our website. The language that we use, obviously, was in the 90s, but, and we would probably use different language today if they were developed today, but they're still very relevant. And it's about relationships. It's about challenging the prison system. It's about giving women and girls in the youth prison as well a voice, and to drive their own journey, not have the so-called, what we used to call, we call the do-gooders that have got the academic qualifications coming into the prison system and telling us what we need to do and not allowing us to be able to articulate what we actually want to do. So we have a lot of services and programs. We do a lot of advocacy and law reform, training and community education, and back in 2007, I was admitted as a lawyer. And so I have a law firm, my own law firm's based at Sisters Inside as well now. And so represent a lot of women and the girls in regards to them being criminalised in prison. So there's a lot of work that we do, not only here in Southeast Queensland, but we have an office up in North Queensland. So where the women's prisons are, and do a lot of work nationally. And we have a national network of incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women and girls as well to drive the agenda. And like we say, nothing about us without us. So it's very much driven by those of us with the lived experience. And still the women inside prison, we have a committee that's part of our management committee.
That's fantastic. Hats off. I think that's a really amazing journey that you've been on, and so fantastic that there's people like you who are supporting those women who find themselves in prison. And I just, there's so much for women and young girls to lose. Have you seen any arts programs that have helped women and girls to reshape their life and give meaning?
I think there's lots of art programs that happen all the time in prison, whether they get an arts program manager or someone comes inside from the free world to do arts programs. But I mean, art for me, I'm not an artist and I take my hat off for those that are artists, and I love art, but I don't think I'm not that type of creative, like with a paintbrush. But I think, I believe that art is about resistance. And especially when you're in prison, because art is about, like I see it used in prison with the women and the girls in the youth prison, it's about relationships and connection. It's about having those conversations. It's about talking about the things that happen to you in your life and that have happened in a safe place where you are actually also putting paint down, whether it's with a paintbrush or your hands or whatever it is. Doing something creative to be able to actually mould that how you want to mould it to represent what it is you're feeling in the moment. And so I see it, the arts programs in prison, as resistance. And we know that it's resistance because we actually saw, and we continue to see, legislation that got enacted here in this jurisdiction, Queensland, where in 2006, anyone who painted art inside the prison corrective services owns it, basically. And if you sell it, they take a percentage of it and you actually don't get the funds. So they not only own you physically, they own your creativity. Where many people, and particularly Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, would paint and be able to sell their art, their beautiful art, and then have money when they were released and to set up their own businesses and move forward. But the system saw that as a way that people were escaping from the cages, if you like. So they decided to enact legislation to remove the money that people were making when they were in prison. So, and we still see that today, that actually happens. So when we run art programs inside the women's prisons or the girls' prisons, we take everything with us and give it to them, whether it's big rolls of canvases, all the paint, and leave it there. And then they sign it out to us, and then we can actually, have show the art, have exhibitions, and then auction it if the women want to, and give all the money to them. And so that's something that we do. We also have young Aboriginal women's art program out here in the free world that Netarita Marbo, who's a well-known artist in this country, she runs all our youth programs across the state. And so every week, the young women, for nearly a decade now, come to Sisters Inside's office, and they've been children that have grown up around us, whether it's women I've been in prison with, their grandchildren, and who, when they are growing up with us all, come to the art program and develop beautiful pieces, and then have art shows and auctions. And then, when we first did that, and we thought, they'll take the money for themselves. They didn't. They actually said, we want to pool the money and go on trips. So they went, to the Great Barrier Reef, to Catherine, they would pool that money and keep it going. And because it's not funded. And just recently, because of, all the shutdown, because of COVID-19, we've had a series of the young women's artwork turned into jigsaw puzzles. And so raising money that way, which has been really powerful. So, yeah. Good. So art is resistance. Art is resistance against the state, and the state knows it, because that's how then they garnish people's money, from their creativity. And I'm talking about people who are caged, Yeah.
Wow, that's I mean, I think that there's a lot in that. There's the fact that you're providing them with a key to escape. As you said, I think that's really interesting because they're escaping the mental torture that could be going on. And surely that must be a good thing. Surely that must be a good way of building up resilience. And I think that resistance is a really clever way of describing it. Thanks, Debbie. That's just, and we'll dive a little bit more into that at the end. We might go to Nerida, and Nerida, it's following on from what Debbie has said and the music that you've been capturing. Your experience is very different. You have a different perspective. Can you tell us about what Heaps Decent does?
Heaps Decent's an arts organisation, and we work with children and young people in New South Wales to create opportunities for creative expression through music and visual art forms. And we work with many children and young people who are experiencing adversity and disadvantage and really complex situations that impact on their health and well-being and their educational engagement and their connection to community and culture. And we've been working in youth justice centres for about 10 years now. And artists and musicians make weekly visits to centres. We work in a couple in Sydney and also the Riverina when we can actually travel. And songwriting and music production has proved to be a really successful and highly engaging way to work with young people in the centres. And we also run visual arts activities that range from making large mural works through to exploring more tech-based media.
So it's giving, again, that voice of expression, isn't it? It's tapping into that through all these different art forms. So what's the impact of that work?
I think the impacts are really, really varied. So not everyone starts from a position of being vaguely interested in making music or arts activity. And often they've got so much going on any given day, or so much going on for them in their experience in the centre, or they might think, you know, tasks look too hard or too boring. So we establish an environment of friendship with young people, so it's relaxed and it's informal, and there's access points for everybody. It doesn't matter what their experience is with art, or whether they think they can do it, or whether they have any musical experience. There's an access point for absolutely everybody. And I would say that generally we do have really high levels of engagement, and usually everyone will come on board at some point during workshop sessions that we run. I'd say that the most sort of immediate impact in engagement is kind of diffusing stress or de-stressing for young people. And I think creative activities are really mindful. And once you're kind of in that zone, you can really focus on the task at hand, and other things kind of dissolve away and you're in that moment. And I think when participants get into that kind of space, they're much more open to experimentation and exploring ideas, getting excited about what they can actually do, seeing art forms emerge in front of them. And they're also in a position where they'll accept encouragement and do things like help other people. There's a real connection that kind of starts in those particular group activities. And I think at that point, participants are learning new skills and experiences are happening that they wouldn't necessarily be aware of, but that's what's happening. And I think songwriting and music is a really great way for young people to express themselves in a context that has relevancy and meaning for them. They listen to music. We use digital workstations, and producers are experienced really in working across any genres, so they can start a conversation about what music they're listening to, what artists they like. And that's the kind of inspiration and starting point for starting, if they're too shy to write lyrics, it might be starting with a beat. But importantly, young people drive the process. So it's about the choices they want to make about the music, the type of music that's created, the type of things they want to talk about, and the type of stories that they want to tell. I mean, that's the whole point of the interaction. As we've already heard, it's about giving voice to an experience, and it might be the experience just on that day. So, you know, there are ranges from, you know, I mean, you have to remember you're working with children. It's
How young might these children be?
well, 10 through to sort of 17. So the stories might be about, you know, what a 12-year-old's experiencing on that day, or they might be talking about missing their friends. They might be talking about how much they miss their family and community. Often there's a really strong connection to culture that young people are drawing on and talking about consistently. And that's a really powerful part of their self-expression. You also, I mean, there's quite extraordinary kind of, I think, raw and really honest stories that come out of these sessions. And I mean, our people who are running these programs with us have been doing it for a long time now. So they're very mindful of making the environment safe and respectful and looking after young people who are, but I think, you know, music provides a space where you can say things, writing lyrics provides a space where you can say things that might be really hard to talk about. And everybody needs to hear those things. It can be really confronting to understand that, you know, you're hearing about the story from someone who's incredibly young and just should not have had the experiences that they've had. That, you know, the other speakers have spoken to and it's harrowing to hear, but you have to hear those stories, and everyone needs to be outraged by that. And having your voice heard, knowing people who are interested in listening to you is really, I think it's really powerful.
Yeah. 10 years old. I mean, I think anybody listening to this, I think of 10-year-olds being put into an institution, and especially in these times where they can't even have visits in these institutions during COVID times, and what that must be like. And to be told to do things and all the things that happen in prison life. I guess, you know, I can feel the emotion coming from you as well. How do you deal with processing the trauma from with young people that, you know, how do you deal with the listening to their traumatic experiences, and how are you able to follow up with them? Do you kind of keep a track of these young people over a period of time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also important to know that the workshop sessions in song making and art making are really positive and uplifting experience. And there's a lot of happiness and joy in all of those sessions. And that's really important. That's why young people want to engage in the that kind of the creative making process. All of the artists who work with us, and when I say all, there's only a few who are very good at this work, and I think we're very lucky to have them working with us, but they're really committed to the process, and it means a lot to them. And so it's really about the experience of the young people, and making sure that the process is of benefit for them. And we do actually, I mean, often when young people are released, we won't know the exact details of where they're going from that point, but we do get a lot of young people who follow us up once they've gone home. So that's their own choice to reach out. They like to get all of the music that they've created, so that they own that music. They can share that music as they please. If they can access, we have a drop-in program that's run in Sydney. So oftentimes they'll come and join in those creative sessions in the Sydney project and continue to work on skills development and music production. And then we do run regional programs when it's possible. So sometimes we will run into young people in communities that we visit. But unfortunately, there are also a lot of young people that we see in and out of the system over a period of time.
Yeah. Let's go back to listening to another track. Norm, I think we've got another one ready.
I used to kick back at the scheme and trade. Day or night, it was a place to be, where me and my brothers could run free. Made a mistake, that's how they got me. When I get out, head back to work. When I get out, I'll get to work. The next generation will be better. I'll go to the park and walk together. All go to the park and walk together. Me and my mates be friends forever. All go to the park and walk together. Never give up no matter the weather. All go to the park and walk together. Me and my mates be friends forever. All go to the park and walk together. Never give up no matter the weather.
Yeah, that's really heartfelt, and it's a beautiful way of putting that expression into music, and it's poetry really, isn't it? So I want to open this up for everybody in the last few minutes that we've got. In conclusion, what needs to change? Debbie, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll be quick. My sister answers this so well, Ruthie Wilson Gilmore. And when asked the question, what has to change? Everything.
Systems broken.
Everything.
Yeah. Okay, Jan Damara, what do you think needs to change?
I so resonate with that. It's the whole foundation of it. The thing is, what it's built on is systems, and systems don't move, they don't grow, they don't evolve, they don't cater to creative, young, emotional beings. They try to stifle and turn you into a system. And when you're turned into a system, it shuts you down from feeling, shuts you down from connection, shuts you down from your very spirit, because you're so constricted sometimes. It's so claustrophobic. You just feel like you want to end it all sometimes at that point. So I agree. I feel like the whole system needs to be taken apart and not even put back together with those pieces. It needs to be put back together with the intention as connection as the center of it, rather than trying to fit anyone into a box and say that, that's the way you can only exist in this society.
Nerida, what do you think? What needs to change?
I think that we all need to hear these stories, and we need to be really shaken up. And we have to agree that we can do a lot better, and it's unacceptable to be locking up children and young people. We need to collectively push for resources to be directed into family and community initiatives that are culturally safe and appropriate local initiatives that address intervention in a holistic way. I mean, taking cues from justice reinvestment programs that are working, and intervention needs to happen outside the criminal justice system, not inside it.
Okay. I might ask Auntie Janice if she's got any thoughts about that. What do you think needs to be changed, Auntie Janice?
I think, I'm turning 70 this year, and I remember the day I've been working in social welfare since, the early 70s, even before that, growing up. And I think the frightening thing is that how much us as a nation, I still see the voice of our Indigenous people. Like if you go on Facebook and stuff like that, like they're still very vocal about the fight for justice, because it's not happened for us. But the change in the system is the fight. Like I've done with all the protesting and the marches and the fight, and it's being that voice that was vocal, but it was it was seen, and what needs to be changed is I feel there needs to be a peeling back, because it's like the cycle just keeps, it's gone around and it's come back to, it's like it's just come back to where we all started how many years ago. So while we still got the fire in our belly and we've got to fight and saying this is not okay, I think what the change needs to be is peel away the complacency of we talk about the system changing. The system's never changed. If anything, it's become more like tyrannical in its way, if that's the word that I'm just thinking of right now. But it's still, the suppression is there, but it's happening on a much broader basis, and so it's suppressing a lot of things. But I think whilst we still have a voice, what needs to be changed is to keep, like, I keep thinking about the things that have become extinct. Like, I look at things from a natural perspective, and things that have become extinct or are not happening anymore. But I think it's like it's got to stir up that fire in people's belly. That's what I think the change needs to be, and we've got to just keep voicing it on whatever level you are. Even like, well, we live in a small town like the desert. But, too many times I think people just want to bury their head in the sand and not face up.
Yeah. Well said. Okay, so, in terms of, you've all had a lot of experience with people who are, on the edge, as Debbie said. What kind of interventions, you see someone in that situation, what do you do? What kind of interventions would you do if somebody might be listening to this today who might be in that situation, or looking after someone in that situation? What would you suggest?
I'd suggest walking on country. Country speaks through all of us: black, white, green, blue, man, woman, grey, straight, whatever. With that natural element is continually reaching out for us. And I know it sounds like it's just so abstract, but really those things in themselves go and, not only, go and sit with the elders, go and sit with people, no matter where you come from, whatever, we all belong, and in that understanding, when we walk on country, we remember our belonging. We belong to those stars, that ocean, those trees, that dirt. I feel it speaks through us and it heals. It heals in ways that allows us to be able to become more grounded, and in that be able to navigate, as I say, in a system that seems to be just cyclic and going through, but be able to navigate that system and not become that system.
That's right.
That's my feeling.
Yeah.
Anybody else on that? All right. Well, it's okay. So what do we need to do to convince people to keep these programs going, so that organisations like Heaps Decent and Sisters Inside don't fall over the edge when we most need them? What message can we pass to people?
I think from our perspective, we seem to be endlessly making a case to funding bodies from the government and philanthropic sectors. And there are private donors interested in supporting the work. There are a lot of people actually interested in supporting work once information is made available to them. So I think that issues that have been discussed tonight, they need to be the focus of attention, so that people can play a part in making change and demand more and demand better. It's not easy at the moment because we can't run the program in centres with the COVID restrictions, but and so, as we've said, kids are even more isolated than ever. I think if we're persistent about the need for activities and intervention, that these things need to bounce back, people will listen.
And Deb, what about you with Sisters Inside? Because without you, I can just imagine so many people coming out of the system are going to feel very lost.
That we started Sisters Inside to have a voice so that people would hear us, hear our experiences and what's happening for us. It was never about funding, and it's still not about funding. It's about valuing people over property. It's about dismantling the racial capitalist world that we live in because it fails us all. It's about abolishing the prison industrial complex, and it's about dismantling the prison industrial complex every day in everything we do, and not hold up the status quo and the reform agenda because it fails us all.
Yeah.
You know, nothing changes if nothing changes. And I think Auntie Janice was saying that before, like from the 70s to now, nothing's changed.
No.
And if we can continue to do the same thing every day, we get the same result. And that is the next generation of children caged, and the next generation caged, and the next generation caged.
Yeah.
And who benefits from that? Those that are employed on the backs of us. That's who's benefited. You know, we don't talk about Aboriginal children being stolen from their mothers and their families and their communities when we know that it's white families who are getting the money from the state and paying their mortgages. No one's talking about that. No one's talking about the reality. No one's, you know, life is precious. Life is precious. I think, you know, that is the reality. And until we can all see that and move away from wanting more things, because we come here with nothing, we leave with nothing. Why are we accumulating all this wealth? And I think Jandamara is saying, like, go back to country for all of us, back to nature, back to that value, those values of life, not have I got a car, have I got more money? And the way I get it is because, you know, Aboriginal people in this world are the ones that are going to be trampled on and traumatised and caged to actually benefit white society. So we got a lot of work to do. And so every day we must dismantle the prison industrial complex, dismantle racial capitalism in everything we do, and be mindful to do that. Not be one of those rats on those spinning wheels inside a cage, going round and round.
Absolutely.
Well said. Well said. Well, thank you so much, Nerida Woods, Jandamara Cad and Debbie Kilroy. If you would like to find out more or offer your support for Heaps Decent, go to heapsdecent.com, and you can go to Jandamara's website to check out his amazing artwork, book him to talk at your event, or buy prints of his amazing work at jandamarasart.com. And if you'd like to support and learn more about Sisters Inside, go to sistersinside.com.au. This program is made possible through the support of Arts Queensland, through the Queensland Arts Showcase program, the Southwest Queensland Regional Arts Network, and the Scenic Rim Regional Council. We also acknowledge support from our local elders and from the team at Arts Front who helped to put this program together. We'll be back next month looking at Heritage Today, and we'll be live in the venue, hopefully, at the Centre Beaudesert on Tuesday, the 14th of September. So good night from me, and good night to all of you. And I hope I get this right, Auntie Janice, Nanyabu.
Nanyabu, yes.
Okay, we might go out with some music from the Heaps Decent project. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight.
High five, everybody.
Bye.
Our choices, our voices unheard. So many people don't listen to our word. I wonder if your eyes don't work. When you see me, I see your smirk. Our choices, our voices unheard. So many people don't listen to